you want to start? One of our panelists is a little late, so we're going to be flipping around a little bit. Alright, and I'm here to tell you about Nadia and the Secret of Blue Water. Has anyone heard of this one?
Yeah. Nope. Yeah.
Oh, maybe not as many people as I thought that was. Alright, well, this is a show which I gotta say has a pretty interesting pedigree to it. It's based on this novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which is a good place to start. Although it's really more accurate to say that it's kind of loosely based on it. Like, they take some small aspects of the book and just make them expand it to become a lot of the show. So, it's kind of a neat setting. It's the turn of the century, like the Industrial Revolution in France, of all places, which you don't see a lot in anime. There's a lot of, they're experimenting with a lot of new stuff, like ridiculous looking planes, all kinds of cool inventions are being figured out right now. And that means that our hero is not going to be normal. He's going to be that guy. Because, of course, we have a show all about inventions. You need some kind of trippy inventor kid. Now, the cast of the show is actually kind of cool. It's got a lot of interesting people. This is Nadia and her Lion King. And there's a bunch of other cool guys on the show, as well as Captain Nemo and his crew. And, of course, what would just think about the Nautilus, or the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea without the Nautilus, which kind of looks like a spaceship, but, you know, it's actually an awesome submarine. So, the story has two main focuses. Like, one of them is on these two, the relationship between them that develops over the course of the show, and that's kind of nice, and of course the backstory of her. And the other one is the battle against this guy for the fate of the world. So they got a lot of good stuff going on. And the two stories are often going to be together, like they'll be on the Nautilus, they'll be doing stuff, but a lot of the time they're going to split up. And you know, we'll follow one group as they go do stuff, and maybe follow the Nautilus a little bit. So they weave them together in a really good way. It also has some big themes that they go out throughout the course of the show. Nadia's vegetarian, which is really hard to do back in 1899. Like, no one else gets it. They're like, why are you doing that? It doesn't make sense. And so they basically have this continuing dialogue throughout the show as they get more arguments to bring to it. They also try to cover, like, racism in, you know, the late 1800s, which was kind of something surprising for anime to try to take on. But they did a pretty good job, like, even though it isn't a major factor. And, of course, they try to go with, you know, what is the role of science? And, you know, what do scientists be moral if they worry about that their inventions are going to be used for war? And that kind of gets played up a lot. Now, the show isn't all serious. There's actually, in fact, quite a bit of comedy in the show. And it's good comedy, too, like character-driven comedy. There's no, you know, giant sweat drops and, you know, waterfalls of tears in the show. It's really based around what the characters are up to. And a lot of it turns out to be pretty hilarious. Like, even the captain of the greatest warship in the world is worried about eating that. One of my favorite sequences has to be when these two characters try to get each other to laugh with like ridiculous facial expressions. Of course, there are plenty of times where the show does get serious, and when it does, it's going to let you know. Sometimes with classy organ music. Now, this is a show made by Gainax, one of its early shows, and it, you know, you can definitely see that there's been a lot of quality, even though it's an older show, put into a lot of the stuff. Like really nice backgrounds, even though they're only seen for like a couple of seconds. Use sort of stunning pencil-drawn backgrounds they use for a lot of the backstory and stuff, which just, they still look great today. Another thing is like illuminated manuscripts, which just look beautiful. So at this point, you're probably asking yourself, man, if I'm one of these people who hasn't seen this, why haven't I seen it? And the answer would be, there's this one point where NHK was like, this show is so awesome, you gotta make more of it. And the guy was like, well, geez, I gotta make the best 5 final episodes ever made. I don't have time for this. Hey, you, go make me some filler. And then they made, like, a bunch of filler. So these are the island episodes. So this is me warning you that if you want to watch this show, you know, I told you about these. You can't say that you were suckered in. You didn't know about it. So what happens here? Okay, question?
Is it based off Mysterious Island book by Jules Verne?
I actually don't know. I hope not. I'll put it that way.
As far as I'm aware, no.
Like, did animation budgets plummet into Mysterious Island? Because, man, they sure plummeted in this section. Like, it just, I don't know what happened. They subbed it out to Korea, everybody got a lot worse looking. That's probably my least favorite. They don't even look anything like each other. All that awesome character-driven comedy, that's kind of turned into Hanna-Barbera a little bit. Very sad, very sad. And then, of course, they couldn't even keep their own stuff straight. Like, that guy's supposed to be having a hot tongue, but they couldn't even get the tongues to align. You finally have the stuff like this, you're not really sure what's going on. I don't know what's going on. Like, what I'm saying to you is you want to avoid these episodes. For good reason. Now, fortunately, you can almost completely avoid watching these episodes. So if you choose to watch the show, which I'm recommending, of course, just skip that part. You don't need it. There's no plot. Yeah, there's 2 episodes, a little bit of plot, but like even that isn't that great. Like all the plot is in the good episodes, which is nice. So what kind of great stuff am I talking about when you're not on that island? Well, you're going to have pretty awesome submarine battles. The kind of slow, creeping stuff where there's a lot of strategy going on. It's not just throw a bunch of guys at them and everyone fires and so on. And the enemies are really clever. Like they're not just going to line up 30 guys and just run them straight at you. They're going to come up with some a really good way to get rid of you because he's got this giant organization. You're just one sub. And of course, the 2 of them just hate each other like a lot. So there's a lot of drama between the 2 of them, of course. Even though for a guy like him, Nemo is really more of a thorn in his side. He's too busy being evil to deal with stuff like that. Other parts of the show focus on actually more along the lines of what Jules Verne's book was about. Exploring the mysteries of the ocean, seeing all the cool stuff that's out there. And of course, what would happen if you exposed the 1900s people to, modern technology, basically. Which can be pretty interesting. The show's also going to take you to a ton of really fascinating places. Like, things you're going to want to know a lot more about. Which I really like it. And of course, character development. Everyone's going to get a lot of character development in the show, because it's a decent-sized cast, but there's few enough people that each one of them, even minor side characters, are going to get quite a bit of development over the course of the show, which is great. There's also a ton of awesome stuff going on, which I can't talk about at all, but trust me, it's good. So what I'm saying to you is join the crew of this great ship. Come with us to see the Nautilus. Now, another side note, there is a god-awful movie. This movie is not made by Gainax. Much like the Island episodes, skip The Secret of Fuzzy entirely. It's a plot about world leaders that are also robots that turn into powder. This is why... Maybe! So please, avoid the movie. Alright.
No, she's out.
Disappointed I still didn't know this one. Like anime trivia was heartbreaking. Oh! Alright, at any rate. So, Gankutsuou is basically a retelling of the Count of Monte Cristo set in like a sci-fi-esque setting. Like, here we go. Yeah, there we go. So, really, all I can talk about for the artwork is that it's astonishing. For those of you who've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. For those of you who haven't, I'll show you in a bit. It uses this static patterns technique, which I'll get to a little later. It really makes every character and every scene incredibly unique. They do an amazing job blending all the CG shows here. So let's take a look. Everything from really huge landscapes to the amazing blending of CG to minute details. We're getting some of the static patterning here, but I'll talk about it a little later. They do a great job recreating all the artwork that makes up their version of Friends. But everything is so lovingly crafted, you really get a sense that they cared so much about making this show gorgeous. Like, this is just a shot of the Count's pocket watch, and just the intimate detail that goes into some of the most minute things is astonishing. So this is the static pattern technique I'm talking about. What really happens is that all of your characters and all of your landscapes are filled in with a pattern rather than color. And when they move, the pattern on them doesn't move. So it gives this almost ethereal feel because your eyes are watching something move and then something stays static because the pattern filled in. So you get this feel that like characters are transparent almost and they're walking through this like pattern-filled world. It's absolutely
I hate to use this as an example, but it's used in the children's cartoon Chapter.
Yeah, you're probably right. I think I've heard that. So the patterns borderline on everything from, pretty subtle to amazingly elaborate. It's just astonishing. If you watch the show, it's fantastic. Now this is a shot I had to take because these papers are on screen for all of maybe 3 seconds. And if you took the time to read them, they're actually in perfect French. and relevant to the plot. So it's amazing. It's amazing how much they care. It's absolutely astonishing. So let's get to the geek characters. They're all incredibly unique. They're all very detailed, fleshed out, and, you know, we really get a sense of who they are by the end of the show, and they all have really important parts to play in the plot. So obviously we've got the Count of Monte Cristo himself, who's, you know, running the show, and it's his quest for revenge, right? We've got Albert, who's our main character. We follow him through a good portion of the show. Now, Albert's going to be annoyingly naive as you watch the show. Like, everyone's going to grasp what's going on except him. He's going to be like, he's out for revenge, and Albert's like, I'm attending his tea party. And you're like, Albert, come on, man. But you know what? What's amazing is, he almost becomes a refreshing character on screen. Everybody else is caught up in corruption and deceit and gets swept into the Count's horrible plans, and he really stays at the balance. But at the same time, he grows and changes, and he learns to understand what the Count is doing as the show goes on. So he's a very dynamic character. It's wonderful. So we've got Franz, who's Albert's best friend. He's incredibly important as the plot goes on. And even characters like Eugenie. I mean, look at those glasses. That's just fine. That's just fine, right? So even characters like Eugenie and Valentine, who you would think, you know, are a bit of throwaways of the fiancés, are incredibly important. When we get to the side characters like Maximilian, who's great. He's got the whole arc to himself. Lucian, who comes in at the end, who's great. Then you've got characters who you think would be completely mundane, right? You're like, oh, her, we see her on the screen in the beginning. We visit the Count. But she can't be important, right? Not only does she have one of the most heartbreaking backstories in the whole show, she's integral to the Count's plot and his quest for revenge against one of the people who betrayed him. And so is this jerkface. I hate him every time he was on screen, and man, is he important. Pay attention to who this guy is. So, our plot is incredibly detailed. You've got to be paying attention all the time. It's really amazing. Oh, even for you book elitists out there, this is a wonderful interpretation of the Count of Monte Cristo. So.
It's better than any movie adaptation.
Except for the ending, which is terrible.
Hey.
The
I read the damn book,
fabulous.
but...
The show's fabulous. So did he.
The ending of the movie's terrible too.
Revenge never looked this sexy. That's all I have to say. Okay? Now, first you're going to be like, the plot seems so simple. For those of you who haven't read the book, you're going to be like, I get this plot already. There's this Count who seems really nice. You know, he's pretty much involved in all these deadly games. He seduces Albert into helping him get in with the high-class friends, right? Now he sees Albert's happily married parents, and oh, he's like, yeah, and you're like, oh, I know there's something up. She's looking at secret photos, and I know where this plot is going. Then stranger things start to happen as the Count invites some of the youth to his villa and starts asking them questions that, you know, almost are amazingly unrelated. It's like, do you love your fiance? Do your parents love each other? He starts hitting and attacking at, you know, an obscure angle. He really doesn't attack pretty simply right away. He puts these huge checks in the bank, and you're like, is there a point to this? You're giving elaborate gifts to the French royalty? Is there a point to this? Having secret affairs? Other people are getting swept into this? I mean, do you guys lose the plot? What's amazing is the plot is never lost. They are following the plot the whole time. And really, this is the Count's quest for revenge against the law, the military, and the bank, who are tied together by a dark past connecting him. And it's wonderful the way they tie everything together in the end. So really, this is pretty much the classiest thing I have ever seen. If you haven't watched it, you really need it.
Don't watch it on fan sub, find the DVDs. The DVDs are prettier.
I gotta ask you a question. What is your favorite season? Is it fall, you know, leaves, fall? Or is it maybe winter, you know, it's snowing and it's kind of nice until it really kind of gets a little bit crappy once the streets really don't get loud? Or is it spring? You know, life is coming back and, you know, it's really nice. Well, for me, it's going to be summer. And that's why I'm here to talk about Natsu no Arashi, which for me was one of the best shows I saw last year. Now, for some of you, all I need to say is that this was written by the same guy who wrote School Rumble. Alright, I've convinced some of you, but for those poor souls that haven't seen School Rumble or that didn't like School Rumble, I'm going to have to convince you the hard way. So, Meet Hajime and Arashi. Now, you know, you're looking at this and you're like, oh god, I've seen this before. Well, no you haven't, because it's actually not a romance or a romantic comedy at all. No, it actually seems to be shaping up to be a pretty good classic slapstick comedy that we haven't seen in ages. So, Hajime and Arashi spend most of their time working at the Noah's Ark, this little cafe here. And there they work with Kaya on the left and June. June seems to be a pretty unassuming fellow who seems to be distinguished by pretty much not being very manly and also really not liking girls. Meanwhile, Kaya is an extremely elegant girl. So you can see there's kind of a little bit of a tension going on there. But, you know, there they work with the greedy, self-promoting con artist Sayaka, who basically just gets her way all the time. But that's okay because she's pretty much the comic relief of the show. So things seem to be shaping up for a classic comedy. You know, this looks pretty good. And then halfway through the first episode, you kind of get this. Like all of a sudden, bam! Time travel out of nowhere!
Why was there a transformation sequence as part of time travel?
There's actually a relevant reason for this to get to later on in the show.
Oh, okay.
Rest assured, the time travel is not just a comedic device, it's actually a serious device, and the show uses it to great effect. Really, it's not just a comedy, it's actually also sort of dramatic, set in World War II era Japan for about half the plot. And these two aren't the only ones who can time travel, because June and Kaya can time travel too. That's because both Arashi and Kaya are ghosts. This means that this actually allows them to time travel. Don't ask why, but it just works out that way. Now, I can't give away too much about this show, because, you know, all the arcs kind of go one by one, kind of gives too much away. But really, it does develop the characters and the relationships between the characters. And it does so in an extraordinarily good way. Really good drama, even as it does good comedy, too. But rest assured, for those of you who are sick to the stomach with the thought of time paradoxes and incessant damage to the space-time continuum, they actually attempt to offer an explanation for why the paradoxes are impossible, even though it's a little bit far-fetched. But what I find most interesting is actually the art styles. From the chiseled male features that you might think of Berserk or Fist of the North Star, to the muted colors and Ghibli-esque stylings of 1945, or even the elegant eyelashes that might remind you of Captain Harlock or Space Battleship Yamato, the animators Shaft have spent no expense to try to really evoke an old style feel to this show. And of course, this is just kind of topped on top by almost every episode. They offer a little short vignette done in a really old-timey kind of flickering way. They even use, old-timey Japanese characters. And in every show, it's trying to reference some 1980s or 1990s manga in Japan, like this one.
ご機嫌はいかが？やるの？とてもよろしくてよ、かな子。そう、それはよかったわ。また面白い本を読みましたねわ。まあ、それは何という本かしら。それは、タイトルを忘れてしまったわ。どんなお話か聞かせてください。ええ、よろしくてよ。それは殿方と殿方の愛と友情の物語。信頼する友人と共に戦う男と男の熱き心の交流。彼らは立ちはだかりし幾多の障害を乗り越え、正義と信念とめくるめく愛を胸に、互いの肉体をぶつけ合い、見る者の陶酔の世界に飛びざらう。まあ、なんと心ときめくお話でしょう。その見学には決まった口癖があるの。ほら、聞かせて。来て！
So basically, I thought that this was an incredibly solid show, and probably was one of the sleeper hits of last year. And it and its sequel, which ended December, are both on Crunchyroll. So there's really no excuse in trying to find this show, because it's really easy. So please, go out and watch this show.
What was the name of it again?
Natsu no Arashi.
Alright, so guys, this show is one you really might have passed by just by looking at it and going, oh, another one of those, like Sword and Sorcery? Guys, this one blends two genres together, and it does a really great job of doing so. So, let's talk about these characters, which are, they're pretty awesome. We have a neat cast. All of our side characters are going to play pretty important roles. And the way they make them blend together is by having these like serious and humorous personalities, and they play off each other in this really fun way. So, we've got Kamichu, who is the Scrap Princess herself. She's got a pretty wide variety of emotions going on, so we'll get to her a little later. Her brother Shannon is definitely a straight man. Raquel is definitely the gentle one. It doesn't show it in that shot, but she's very gentle and lighthearted. Leo's a big dude. Leo. Winia is relatively down-to-earth and everything. She has her goofy moments, and of course Chris is our assassin, so of course he's very serious. What's amazing about all these side characters is that they managed to do so much with so little screen time. Her twin brother, Forsyth, he's not on screen very often, but he is really important to plot development. Fury shows up really late and has a really big emotional impact. The Peacemakers are really important and they aren't on screen very much. The Queen is my personal favorite. I kid you not, I think she's got about 3 times actually on screen talking. And then is involved in one of the most emotionally shattering episodes I have ever seen in an anime. It was amazing. Very little screen time, they managed to do a lot. So our plot is really this swords and sorcery without throwing a whole lot of stuff at it. It has these fun, humorous, and serious moments, which are balanced really nicely in a show, which is kind of rare. It's really a lot of fun. The arcs keep everything moving. Like pretty much every 4 episodes, you've got something going on, and then it shifts to something else. They set up a new mystery, and then they move. So it's pretty amazing. And the episodes really just never waste your time. They're a lot of fun. So we've got these fanatics right in the beginning. I'm going to be taking you through episode 1 because it does an amazing job of showing all of this. We've got these fanatics from the Church of Bowser, and they're like, oh, we're here to attack you. And they're like, well, we're here to stop you. We get our cool swords and sorcery battle. We get to know the who's who and the what's what. And what's more important is that we get to learn the tight family bond that's going to hold this family together. It's so incredibly pleasant to watch on screen and to see, because it's very rare that characters are fighting just for each other and for the sake of taking care of each other. So it's really nice. So as if things couldn't get worse, poor Pacifica gets betrayed and gets stuck in the church where this guy is like, I'm pretty much going to take you out. And you're like, man, they are just pouring on the serious. This episode must be super serious. Your siblings must be panicking by now. We're stopping to tell the assassin that soy sauce dumplings taste great. And you're almost like, wait, you know what? I needed that. It's really nice that you're not freaking out and angsting about everything. We're back to a serious moment where Raquel's like, oh, Pacifica is in danger. I am so serious. And we get this cool chanting battle. This guy gets toasted. And then an amazing switch, like right there. He's like, wait a minute, sister. There is no way that you can chant that fast and get that kind of magic to come out of there. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'll summon the best magic I have and blow up your church. And you're like, you know what? I really needed that. And another twist, instead of being grateful, Pacifica's like, Raquel, you blew up the church. And Shannon's like, Raquel, you gave away our position. And you're like, man, you know, that was great. I needed that. You guys aren't anything. You guys are great. So we got a lot of humanization with our characters, which is something that was really key for me. All the characters get pulled out into all dimensions. You really get a 3D effect with these characters. It's absolutely sensational. They also remember to show you how the siblings' way of life works, which is something that's pretty rare on these like on-the-run type of animes when we're talking about it. This is a really great episode that showcases this. Pacifica gets poisoned by an assassin who has the ability to control bugs and shoot poison darts. Now, in a huge switch of characterization, we get to see Shannon take sort of the submissive role. He has to sit by and watch over her the whole episode. And he really shows a lot of like compassion and concern, which I haven't seen out of him up until this point. Whereas Raquel puts on the badass face. She's generally the soft one. She goes in and she's like, I am about to take you out. And it's amazing that you get to see these characters pulled like that. It's fantastic. The family dynamics were a lot of fun for me too. These are real siblings who act like real siblings. That's what's amazing. They're not like incestuous with each other. They're not lovey-dovey and frolicking the flowers. They deal with jealousy. They fight with each other. They have disagreements all the time. Shannon in particular goes through these moments where he has such self-doubt that you really feel for him because, you know, you have such an emotional tie to these characters. And it's really amazing. I remember life's not really all that glamorous. They have all these shots in there of the siblings doing work, and you're like, do they just waste this? And it's like, no, these people have to pay for food and pay for the inn. You forget that when you see families on the run sometimes. Their life is very difficult. Yes, he's like cleaning the bathhouse there. But that's Mr. Soupy. Like green dinosaurs, right? We even get a lot of humanization with some of our characters you would think would be very side characters, like Winnie gets kidnapped, and you're like, man, they're gonna just use this scene to have like a really cool swords and sorcery battle, right? Yeah, we're gonna get our swords and sorcery, but we also get a lot of fleshing out of our characters. Like, Winnie is shown to be not nearly as timid as you would imagine she is. She's like, Chris, you're just jealous of them. You know, they look out for each other. And that hits him with a ton of bricks. So you really get a sense of these characters have a lot of depth. It's pretty great. Now, Pacifica's my personal favorite because she's useless. She's a 15-year-old girl. She eats a lot, she complains a lot, she doesn't want to do anything, she wants to take a bath half the time. And you're like, my goodness, why do I care about you in the slightest? That's because the show does an incredible job of putting this like permeating sadness throughout the show. It's like layered in there. And when you see people like attacking her or after her life, you get a sense that she's not just a 15-year-old girl. She's a 15-year-old girl that bears the weight of the world. It's very heavy, so it's really nice to see her sort of acting like a 15-year-old girl to break that, like, you know, angst chain we're used to. So the intensity goes up pretty fast because otherwise it'd be too simple of a show, right? So we got the peacemakers who come in a little later. They have the ability to possess the town. It's kind of neat. What's most important is they're able to possess the guardians. And this is really important because it showcases that, you know, our guardians are human, just like the rest of us. Pacifica also activates this neat power, which sets up the huge mystery for the show. She's going to carry. We get some more mysteries in there. Yeah. Inevitably, we get this awesome, like, dragoon battle. All sorts of cool things start happening. But wait! Beast Princess Cetis and Arote are here to, like, break your mind. Midway through the show, they just break your mind. You're like, what? My plot just went that way, and I'm going that way. I am confused. Now, haven't you ever been in an anime and been like, man, I am so confused. Will you just explain it all to me? And then they do. They take 2 solid episodes to be like, are you lost? Why don't we explain everything to you in layman's terms? Are you scientific? Perhaps we'll explain it all again in more complicated terms. You get the whole plot explained to you in stunning detail. And remember, just in case you pass out a little, don't you worry, Pacifica herself passes. It's her destiny and all. She should be sleeping in class, right? So the Capitol is waiting. I suggest Just highly suggested, girl.
The
Great
Forces
show.
of Awesome.
Yes.
So, we're at a pretty generic con. You'd think, man, we gotta have some sci-fi. People here like sci-fi, right? Right? Well, rest assured, you don't have to be a Trekkie or a Star Wars fan to like it. You can actually like things that aren't either of those and still watch sci-fi. So even those of you who don't like sci-fi can watch Time of Eve. That's because, so hopefully some of you have already heard of it, some of you have already watched it. Yes, exactly. And those of you who didn't see it right before this, well, what's wrong with you? You should have seen it right before this. But for those of you who didn't, Time of Eve follows a simple guideline. Robots are cooler than spaceships. So, of course, in accordance with this, Time of Eve deals with robots, specifically androids. But it's not Terminator or Matrix or anything like that. It's not serious, hard sci-fi. It's more of the kind of like vague Blade Runner-esque, but even that's not really true. It's kind of a little bit more like Isaac Asimov. I mean, look at this guy. Look at his sideburns. Look at those sideburns. He knows what he's talking about. But no, seriously, like Asimov did a wonderful job dealing with, you know, different plots and veins and themes based off of various, like, basically what this anime is it's basically like, let's take Asimov's iRobot and set it to anime. Like, those of you who have seen this, would you probably agree that that's probably what it is? Because, you know, it's basically androids and robots and, you know, following the 3 laws and so forth.
When you
But
say iRobot, it's
I do not mean that iRobot. Yes, that's right. They actually do reference all 3 of Asimov's laws of robotics. That's, don't harm humans, don't always obey humans, and don't let yourself come to harm. But it's in that order, so you have to prevent harm from hitting humans, even at the cost of your own life. The robot has to. So, you know, each of the first rule supersedes the second and the third, second rule supersedes the third. But this actually leads to a lot of very interesting plots. And, you know, they actually get a different plot in each episode and it really kind of explores. But there's a little bit of a difference here, and that's that in this world, robots are strictly segregated from humans. I didn't really read Foundation and stuff like that, so I don't know exactly whether they did the same thing in Asimov, but it's actually strictly segregated in the sense that, like, they actually have laws to prevent, they actually have a societal expectation that androids should be treated separately from humans. I mean, take into consideration this ad that appears shortly in one of the ads, in one of the shows. Yeah, that ethics committee basically kind of focuses a lot on trying to keep the humans and androids separate. It's kind of like almost like some sort of racism analog, except with robots and humans. So it really kind of does a good job of that. I mean, take for example, as I have been mentioning before, there are rules that try to keep the humans and androids separated, even though they look so very similar. This is one of the cases. They have to have a ring displayed above their head in public so that you know that you're talking with an android. But in the illegal underground cafe of Time of Eve, they don't have that because, you know, it's illegal. So one of the primary rule of the Time of Eve cafe is you aren't allowed to actually distinguish humans and androids. So which ones of these are androids? I bet you can't guess. Of course, because they look almost identical. Of course, this leads to some humor when you're supposed to treat robots the same as humans. So, really, this show kind of just focuses a lot on, really, what is the difference between a human and an android who is practically human? It's kind of like this old philosophical debate of, in some ways, the philosophic zombie and so forth, for those of you who actually think about philosophy. And, you know, even some of you, they might complain about the last episode, but I thought the last episode was actually pretty good. It really kind of brings things together and opens it for the rest of the, for another series. So, really, you guys should have watched, or should watch, Time of Eve, because it's freaking amazing.
Yes! Yes! Alright, sounds like we got a few people here for Kamichu. Well, it's a show that starts with a simple premise. this girl woke up one day and was like, hey, I'm a god now. And it's a god, like, not in our sense, but more of like the Japanese sense, where there's a god for kind of everything, you know, leaves and rice balls and so on. So it's almost more of a spirit than a god the way we think of it. Now already, that's a pretty awesome concept for a show. Like, most shows would just be like, alright, we're done. Like, that's awesome enough, we can just explore that for the rest of the show. This one becomes even bigger than that. We're like, alright, we're gonna have some romance as well, we're gonna have drama between people in like school elections maybe. And it also, fascinatingly, is a period piece set in 1983 Japan, which I thought was kind of a cool way of doing it. Now, it's a really imaginative world. Like, there's a lot of characters like these guys, that they're like gods that you can see and so on, that are minor characters. Like, they don't get speaking lines, but the sort of the same group of them is throughout the town, so you get a sense that you're really living in a community. The gods spend a lot of time in their own little realm, which actually kind of looks pretty awesome. And it's the kind of place where you can just sort of hang out and talk about, you know, how popular you are in the human world. And it's a pretty nice place unless things get a little out of hand. It's also a nice place where you can just relax. You can just look at that guy. I don't think it's pretty good, actually. Now, for me, what really made this was that every episode is unique. Like, it's different. You haven't heard of it before. It may be slice of life, but it's not what you're expecting. So I'm going to give you a couple examples. One of these would be, we're going to go to the meeting of the gods. Kind of big and stuffy, right? Well, no, it's actually a convention, Kamichu. And of course, if you're going to a convention like that, you better be writing in style. While you're there, you can get all kinds of classes, learn how to be a better god. You know, kind of like a panel you're at now, how to be a better anime watcher. You're going to go to the various vendors and buy all kinds of cool stuff right down the hall. And of course, see a lot of cool guests, like Death. I guess we don't get to merit guys like that. And fine entertainment from some of the best bands you'll ever see. I mean, just look at that guy. That's awesome. Alright, what's up next? Well, a beach episode. You're like, wait a minute. I've seen a lot of anime. There's a beach episode in every single one. This isn't unique. Well, almost immediately, it changes to being something completely different. They get totally rained out. Like, what are we gonna do now? Well, there's this cool old bathhouse, beach house here. Let's go explore that. So they kind of walk through. It's been abandoned for a couple of years. They see all these various things, these old photos, old ice making machine, broken record player. They spend quite a bit of time doing that. Now later, sort of in her role as a god, she gets to meet all the gods that represent those items. They're like, hey, you know, thanks for going to that old beach house. It's been a while since anyone was there. And then later in the episode, like, she gets to invite like her parents and everyone else who sort of shared the memories of what the beach house used to be like back to that beach for like a sort of like a one-night party in the middle of the night on the beach. But like, the sun is shining. It's basically like it was 20 years ago. And it's a great episode because it's not about her or her god powers. It's about like the town and her parents and sort of this like nostalgic feeling they're getting from like being able to go back for a little bit. So it was really a great episode that I wasn't expecting at all from like a beach episode. Another episode which just took me by surprise was this here. We got this old guy we're going to talk to, and he's like, I remember back when I served in the battleship Yamato. It was an awesome time. I also left before it sunk. And so then later in the episode, like, the ship itself has managed to get in contact with her, and is like, yeah, I've been sunk for a long time now at the bottom of this ocean, and, you know, I want to go see where I was, you know, basically born or built. So she's like, all right, I'm willing to help out with that. That's a nice thing. And rather than just immediately have to, like, use her god powers and fix everything, a lot of the episode is spent like with her having to learn about the Yamato itself, and you, the viewer, get to too. Like, you know, how big was it? How many people were on it? What kind of stuff happened on it? And it's not at all the episode I was expecting. It was like, it's almost like an homage to and laying to rest of the ship itself, told through the anime. And I was like, oh wow, I didn't think that was going to happen at all. Like, it was great. And lest you should think the whole show is about god powers and so on, there's plenty of episodes where we're just going to hang out. Like, this is a whole episode where she doesn't want to get out from underneath her nice, warm, like, Tatsu thing there. So she just kind of lays around all day. Like, yeah, I don't really feel like it. And let me tell you, back in the day when we could walk uphill 15 miles in snow barefoot, there were remote controls. You had to find your own way to change the channel without getting up in your blanket. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. Now, at this point, you're probably saying to yourself, all right, this is the kind of show we're going to have a lot of this, right? It's going to be all over the place. The answer is not at all. It's what they do is like it's almost Ghibli-esque in that they cut out all the fan service to make room for more character development and especially more amazing art.
Wow, that's
Like, yeah, just like beautiful landscapes. Like, now look at all the detail that went into this. There are unique characters in it. Just, shots of the river, shots of the town. They put a lot of detail into, really knowing the place that they're in. And even like, the small areas like the shrine, it was beautiful. Everyday items are drawn with the same level of care as everything else in the show. And all the nature scenes also look great. Look at that dog. He's having great. Like stuff almost like a painting. Now,
This ain't no Avatar.
yeah, there's no yeah. Now, what really struck me about this was like this felt like a place you could live in. And it turns out you can. It's actually a real town in Japan called Onimichi, which the creators must have truly loved because they recreated it in painstaking detail. Everything from local points of interest to the school that she attends, like throughout the show, down to things like this wooden board. They recreated it in like just amazing things. It's like, wow, this is great. So really, the show has really on almost every shot you can think of. It's slice of life for people who don't normally like slice of life. So definitely give this show a shot. Come along with us back to 1983. This is called Kamichu.
It's a heartbreaker. It's one of my favorite shows ever. It's absolutely fantastic. Let's get through it. Alright, so I'm going to start by talking about the art and all the characters a little bit, because this is the high point of the show. Now, just bear with me as I go through it. It's going to be a little long, but this artwork is everything. It's just amazingly stellar. Just watch. There's a certain level of detail in this show that I'll have to get to, because you're going to look at the artwork and be like, is she nuts? No, really, it's not. There's a uniqueness given to each and every character. There's a real detailing with the CG that they put into the show. It's very lovingly crafted, it's very lovingly blended, so we're going to get to it. We've got Haruka, who is probably one of the best female protagonists ever. Like, all this crazy stuff just starts happening to her, and she's like, okay, she just goes along with it in this awesome way. She's a fantastic protagonist. What's really important is take a look at the artwork for a few seconds, because this is how she looks. This is how her best friend looks. So already we're getting like a difference in art style. Stick with it, because every character has their own unique art style, their own unique set of features, their own unique set of facial expressions. Just like everybody in the room, it's very human, it's amazing. Now take a look at how soft a lot of these characters look. They're the children characters, the innocent characters, versus some of the harder characters you're going to meet. We've got these very sharp angles going on, super sharp angles going on. Now, without me telling you, you can probably guess the personalities of these characters, right? Which is an amazing detail. It's an amazing level of detail you never get to see. Everything, when they start putting emotion into his face, like you can see his face contort.
His hair looks like a sickle.
He is. He's a little bit of a psycho, but that's okay.
Sickle.
When you get a lot of the emotion played out, you really get to see it on their face. This is a shot where he's like really distressed, and the camera like zooms in, and you can see the distress lines. It's amazing the level of detail they put into showing these character facial expressions and emotion. And of course, when you're not looking at characters, CG always looks great. This is her house blended. This is Haruka's house blended in really nicely. It's really amazing details. And even things that are, really small are blended really nicely. Like they take the time to craft every little item in. When you're not looking at characters, you get to look at some pretty artwork. It's really good. And here's one of the coolest parts of the artwork, which I really want to talk about. If you remember what Haruka looks like, this is a really different shot. And this actually occurs like right in the second episode. And you're like, wait a minute, the art style just changed? Yeah, it did actually. And you know why? It's because now the plot has gotten super serious. It's almost like they're telling you mood through the artwork, which is such a rare thing. It's absolutely amazing. So it changes midway through, and it's like, now we're really serious. Watch these characters change. Not just in emotion and speech, but in art. This is one of the coolest things ever. At one point, they have these two characters fighting, which causes a dimensional shift. Now, not only does the dimensional shift cause them to start fighting harder, the artwork starts to break down. You get this comic book coloring when the two of them are battling each other. How hard are they hitting each other? So hard, the artwork is starting to break. So hard that we get a pencil sketch shot. This lasts very short, it's like all 24 seconds. But he hits him, and he literally breaks all the artwork, the color, the detailing out. You're just left with this raw pencil sketch battle. The mood is told through artwork. It's an experience. It's absolutely stellar. I can't even hype it enough. It's amazing. So don't be turned off by looking at the characters. It's beautifully done. And what would a great show be without great plot? So pretty much, this show just really keeps you want to watch. Like, you want to keep watching because it leaves you on a cliffhanger. It's amazing. They really integrate these sci-fi themes in with a lot of character development because it's just as important as everything else. Quantum physics is going to look real cool by the end of the show. Everything also gets tied together really perfectly. For those of you who are like, there's too much going on, it's all going to make sense. That's what's so beautiful about it. So I'm going to take you through how much it tries to break you a little bit in the beginning. But you just got to be paying attention and absorbing everything real slow because they're going to be like, look, this huge battle in space, cool people with powers, girl taking a nap. Yeah, girl taking a nap, girl's friends. Okay, all right, slice of life, mystery guy on a rooftop. And you're like, oh, wait, what? Who are you two? They're very important, though. Pay attention to Dr. Chida and Toriyama. They're important. Whoa, where are we? Like, taking it in pieces. The show is presenting you with mysteries that it's going to solve later. Crazy mysteries. So we get some, intense stuff happening right in the beginning episode. The show doesn't waste any time. It's like, all right, Haruka's got this crazy power. You know how detailed that necklace is, by the way? She freezes time. Holy wow, this guy falls out of the sky, and it's like, you're the dragon torque. And then he gets sucked back into the sky. Who was that guy? I have no idea. But he appears later, and he's like, hello. And she's like, I think I know you. And you're like, this is episode 1. What just happened? He's like, who are you? Listen, buddy, I'm you. And you're like, it hurts. Trust me, it's all going to come together. That's the amazing part is, are you paying attention? Make sure you do. Make sure you do. The show keeps you thinking. So keep these things in the back of your mind. And as they get filled in, you'll be amazed at how they fill it in and they present something else. It's wonderful. The Dragon Torque is one of my personal favorites. Usually things like this are used as a plot device. Instead, hers uses all these amazing abilities that come together to integrate the plot. She blocks powers, she shows the past, she chooses futures at one point. It's really neat. Noein himself is obviously running the whole show, and he's the biggest mystery the show's got. You're really not going to understand a whole lot about him until the end, but he is incredibly important. He doesn't reveal a lot about himself, so when the reveal comes along, you're just like, whoa, whoa. Those character relationships I talked about are incredibly important. Obviously, every character's relationship to each other is really going to integrate the plot together. It's important. You got to keep track. Also, the characters' relationships to their mothers is very important. To their parents. So rarely do you get to see parents in an anime. This show incorporates the parents. It has an entire episode dedicated to each of their mothers, detailing why they are the way they are, and they're wonderful episodes. You're like, wow, I didn't know parents could be so cool. Especially Haruka's parents. Of course, the show makes sure to, remember that these are real kids. They spend their summer break, gossiping and talking about love life and buying weird things off the internet. Just look at those glasses. Oh, Miko, you're the best. Alright, it's sci-fi. So, we are going to have a lot of sci-fi going on. And there's going to be a lot of really difficult concepts in the beginning. Just like the way the show throws a lot at you, it's going to throw a lot of sci-fi at you. So you're going to be like, whoa. But the amazing part is that it uses it later to help you reinforce. It's almost like it's teaching you all over again. So you're going to be like, whoa, there's lots of jargon. Hello, irregularity, dimensional resonance, tropic phenomenon, hyperspins, and you're like, what's going on? And then they show it to you. This is one of my favorite scenes ever. Really, you've got Toby who causes a dimensional ripple, which you've only been hearing about through an irregularity, and you're like, He pinpoints Haruka's location in time and space, and then yanks her through dimensions. And then Karasu further reinforces the point by going, oh my gosh, you just caused a dimensional ripple. And you're like, I get it. Wow, I get what they're talking about. You just shown it to me. They do this all over the place. And you're like, oh no, this show's going to run into one of those guy X tripped over it and the future's gone, right? Like, oh no, I've ruined everything. So at one point, Haruka goes into the future, and she's like, oh, did you just like screw up time and space? And she's like, look, girlfriend, we're playing with dimensions here. Like, we're the big boys of sci-fi. We know what we're doing, and here's a visual for your enjoyment. We're going to talk all about, you know, alternate selves. It's just amazing the way this plot works. We also get an incredibly detailed explanation of how it all works later, for those of you who are very technical, and you're like, does this show know what it's talking about? Oh, but it does. Dr. Ishida explains it to you. For those of you in the audience that are like, that's not fair, we're visual people. Pretty pictures are provided. Showing just that, it's so silly.
All that cat was watching.
Yes! She explains it with a picture. It's so stellar. So remember, kids, that science is fantastic, and so is this show, so really don't miss out. It's wonderful.
That's pretty.
Whoa, what?
Alright. Who here has heard of Violinist and Hamelin? 3! Alright, this will be a good panel then. So, what are we looking at in Violinist and Hamelin? Well, we've got this fantasy world going on. There's a battle of good and evil happening between these two opposing forces. You're probably like, wait a minute. I've seen battles of good and evil. Are you sure this show is anything special? Don't worry, we're going to get there. First, let me take you through some characters. We've got a flute, who's like this young princess. She's going to come into some healing abilities. A swordsman, a knight, a mage. That guy. He was brought up by carnival folk. You'll have to excuse his outfit. And Hamelin, the brooding leader of the team, with his gigantic violin. That's not a cello or anything. It's actually a violin. It's just really big. All right, as well as a bunch of other side characters who get a lot of time and development on screen, which is impressive. Plus, the coolest bird in all of anime, right? That guy. So at this point, you must be like, wait a minute. I know exactly what's going on here. Are you absolutely certain that you weren't like playing an RPG? The characters kind of jumped out of it on you, like, you sure this is anime? And what's going to happen, of course, is that they're going to team up and take down the baddie and everything is going to be great, right? I know what story. Well, that's not really how it works out. Like, characters on this team, like, they don't get along so much as they are constantly fighting with each other. And for a lot of good personal reasons, they have personal histories that just aren't going to intersect properly. Sometimes they're going to change sides. They're not going to do the things that you think they should because, like, they personally have good reasons not to. And the party is constantly being torn apart by strife. Like, they're going to be fighting each other more often than they're going to be fighting the bad guys. All kinds of events are going to rip them apart from each other, like destruction of countries and so on. And also, just the various plot is going to keep them apart while on the show. You're like, you know that these guys are supposed to unite and take out the bad guy. And the show just refuses to let that happen, which is really interesting. It's like, wait a minute, those guys are supposed to be a group, there's not going to be. And a big part of that is our villains, who are a really interesting crowd. Like, we got this guy, he's kind of your big, strong guy, doesn't go down easily at all, kind of jerk. This guy is really interesting. He's this beastman, he can control all manner of swords, like, you know, not just like regular swords, he can like make things come out of them, have special abilities. He also gains the abilities of anyone whose blood he drinks. And, on top of all that, he's incredibly manipulative. So this guy is an interesting guy. Then there's Sizer, who's probably almost equally interesting. She's basically a fallen angel, and rather than kill her enemies, she likes to render them helpless and then emotionally devastate them. So she's going to be providing a lot of interesting stuff throughout the show. And this guy, who tries to keep it all together, probably one of the more interesting concepts I've ever seen. He's basically a young kid who carries around the head of a demon lord that is possessing him. The two of them talk with one voice, which is awesome. So really, he's kind of like the leader of the team there. And there's other villains, including quite possibly the most wonderful anime hair ever. Like, seriously, just look at that guy. Now, what's interesting with the villains is they're not really a united front either. In fact, they freaking hate each other. They're just basically united in their objective of what they're doing. There's always backstabbing, there's power struggles throughout the show. They just don't like each other, which is great. And like, all right, they're not this like monolithic force that's trying to kill you. They're a lot like the heroes. If it weren't for this guy, like the whole thing would just come flying apart. He's like, guys, you gotta take these guys out. Come on, anybody? Now, what really is interesting about the show, though, what sets it apart from other shows, is that the power of music is one of the biggest aspects of the show. Specifically, classical music. Like throughout the show, various basically magical musicians Like, they use music to powerful effect. I don't think I've ever seen Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker used to such awesome effect anywhere. Like, there's music for combat. Like, maybe Carmen's going to call down fireballs on people. Maybe you can raise the dead and, like, have them walk around as your servants. Or back to rest using, like, Mozart's Requiem. Just pretty amazing stuff, like, you wouldn't think about it. And it also provides a little bit of education on the various kinds of music through the coolest bird ever. Like, what was the, basically, not only what's the song and who wrote it, but what was the motivation behind writing that song, and then it plays out in front of you through the characters doing it. Like, and it's really well done. You're going to learn something, and it's probably the coolest way to do music history ever. So, I like that one. Then there's the art in the show. Now, this is obviously an older show, but the art can still be pretty amazing. You'll be like, where is this level of detail in today's anime? I don't know. I kind of wish it was still there. Now, you're probably saying, all right, why haven't I heard of this show? Well, it isn't licensed, so it is kind of tricky to find, but I think they have it on that Crunchyroll thing now. It's obviously older, and it did have somewhat of a small budget, which means some of the scenes are basically going to be panovers of static images while characters are talking, so they can save their budget with cool action scenes. So if you need constant fluid animation, you might want to give this one a pass. And of course, it's just a little bit depressing. Like, maybe there's going to be awful deaths of all kinds of people. Situations that are just going to be like, this is terrible. Tragedy is going to constantly strike different people. What I'm basically getting at here is it's actually not a light watch at all. So this isn't going to be a happy show. If you end up like that guy, I warned you. If you do think you like the concept but don't want your depressing, you might want to check out the movie. The movie is based on the manga, which is actually basically a lighthearted romp, like maybe what you were expecting when I started talking. So that might be more your speed. But if you want something that's different and honestly a lot darker, this is the show you might want to look into. The bird commands you to watch. It's called The Violinist of Hamelin. So thanks for coming, folks. Can I want you